Hello, all, and welcome to Essence of Wonder. We have a wonderful show for you today with Jenn Lyons. We have looked at the astounding this year, and we're truly impressed by the quality and how it is increased every single year. With that said, this time something special is going on here. Not only do we have a writer who has a new book out, but several. And we're astounded. I didn't actually mean for this play of words to happen. Karen can slap me later by the quality and the immersion that we feel as we read her work. Karen, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you, Gotti. How are you?
I'm good. I understand there is some sort of fight happening in the second half of the show.
So there was going to be a martini showdown with Tammy Cox, but I have to say I am having on who can make the perfect martini or who has the strongest opinions on martinis. But now I think it's going to be a bit of a discussion after a night of drinking snuck up on me last night. I'm feeling a little hungover, and I'm not ready to advocate for anything alcoholic at the moment.
Fair enough. So let's introduce Jen, and
I yield.
you yield. The martini is won over Karen. Jen, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm still ensnared by Karen's description of the second part of the show. I think earlier on she mentioned something about she's prepared for a time of reflective sobriety.
Yes, I'm refocusing on my future full of reflective sobriety.
Well, I mean, I can hardly blame her for that. But no, I think, contest. We're just gonna talk about what our fervent beliefs are without, maybe so much, yeah, having the
Okay.
contest of it, so to speak.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Let's start by first introducing you. That's always important.
I'm Jenn Lyons, the author of.
I didn't mean to throw that at you. We're very happy for you
I'm
to
sorry,
introduce
sorry, sorry.
yourself, though.
Okay.
No. We are very happy for you to introduce yourself, although we did prepare in advance to not throw that burden at you if you like. What would you prefer?
Jen, the description you sent us was delightful, and I have it here. But if you'd like to,
No. Go ahead.
So Jenn Lyons lives in Atlanta, Georgia, with her husband, 3 cats, and lots of opinions on everything from the Sumerian creation myths to the correct way to make a martini. She's wanted to be a number of things, or Batman. Definitely Batman.
She can't be Batman because I'm Batman.
I'm going to stand on ceremony on this one. But she's now a video game producer by day, spends her evenings world building and writing fantasy. And when she's not writing, she can be found using an impressive variety of fountain pens at several local coffee shops. She's well known for her Chorus of Dragons book series, which is one of several things we're going to talk to her about today. This is a great intro, Jen.
It is unfortunately pre-pandemic. You won't find me in any coffee shops these days. But what can you do?
Very reasonable.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also these days I'm actually writing full time. So that's been a shift.
Congratulations. That's gotta be a hard shift in life.
It's been weird. It's been very weird. So
Let's stop everything. There is a cat. Introduce us to the cat.
Yes, he doesn't like to be picked up, but we'll try. There we go. This is Ozymandias. And yeah.
I gotta retrace where that name comes from because it's kind of funny. Everybody names their evil wizards Ozymandias, and I'm like, where does that come from? When did that become?
It's I mean, obviously it's a historical reference. Ozymandias is the Greek name for an Egyptian pharaoh, and there's a Shelley poem that's very famous about it. But then, of course, it got picked up and used as the name for the villain in the Watchmen series. So that's, I think, where most people know it from.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm unclear which nerd reference it came from. Which one did you name the cat after? I think is
the Watchmen one. When we first got him, he had a very Egyptian-looking profile, though. So that's kind of
It's kind of interesting because I'm what I would call very much an amateur writer. I write for fun only. And I hang around some writers, and everybody has a story where they named their wizard person Ozymandias. I don't know why. I don't
Ozymandias.
know how. They don't know why, but they do.
Well, it's a good name. It's a good name. He, of course, has not lived up to that name in that he's just a complete sweetheart. So
He's Batman. My knight.
yeah, it was a hard day for me when I realized I couldn't be Batman. Just unfair.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Actually, this is one of my oldest automatic jokes. I don't have many of them, but I think for at least 15 years, when people say I'm Batman, I said, no, you can't be Batman. And I think I stole this from somebody.
Well,
Anyway.
you know, it's the old meme, right? If you could be Batman, always be Batman. So
Dress for the work you want, not the work you have. That's another meme, right?
That's right.
I have to say, one of my favorite things I used to live in New York City right next to the convention center. And every Comic-Con, I would see people dressed in really good cosplay as Batman, Spider-Man, like every villain. Like they really looked like they'd walked right off of a movie set. And if you filmed them, they would look just as good as the real like characters in filming. But they're all afraid to jaywalk because they're not from New York. And watching Spider-Man like waiting on an empty street for a light nervously is just precious.
That's great. That's great. I remember when I was in Dublin a couple of years ago for Worldcon. That was the thing I noticed. Yeah, I saw. The thing I noticed right away was that the difference between the tourists and the natives was the willingness to just right out into the middle of the street, regardless of what the traffic lights were. So, yeah.
I think I enjoyed Dublin a little bit too much.
Dublin was lovely.
With that said, I did go to the staff weekend 2 or 3 times. So I've been going a year after year after year until the convention. And I kind of got used to it in a way that I can't even describe. Anyway, we are here to honor you and your work. And we would like to start with a question. I don't know if it's a softball or a hardball or just random, but as we were looking through your work, we were kind of wondering is this based on some homebrew D&D setting? Were there any influences from role-playing on your side?
It's totally based on a homebrew D&D setting. Absolutely is based on. I mean, you know, there's decades of work that has gone into that setting. So when I decided I wanted to start writing. I was like, well, why wouldn't I use it? I've already got so much stuff invested in it. You know, and I fouled off the numbers a little bit, but not so much that you couldn't look through.
Were you the dungeon master?
What was that?
Were you the dungeon master? The game master?
I was the main person coming up with a lot of the stuff. It varied. We kind of took turns.
Fair enough. I'll tell you that I do know some writers that started writing due to becoming DMs. But that's maybe a story for a different time.
Yeah, I unfortunately I don't do as much DMing anymore because my time is taken up writing. But yeah, back in the day.
How long has this game or group been going on for?
Well, it's not anymore, but and I doubt that anybody that was originally involved in it would recognize what currently exists because it's departed quite a bit from the original foundations. But like virtually all the names have changed and a bunch of stuff. But I want to say it was probably 20 years.
Oh, that's beautiful. I just love hearing about groups like that. My partner is still playing with a group for like 10 to 15 years. They were high school friends.
Yeah.
Mid-30s now, still playing together. It's I don't know. It's a nice nerd dream, frankly. Well, all right. So moving into some things about the world. I was really interested in why you chose to have all of the demons, and dragons, and the gods like all start out as human.
Mostly because I could. You know, it was just like I said, I was trying to divorce it a little bit from its D&D roots, and once I came up with the conceit for how the universe was going to work, I was like, well, you know, it's not going to be, there aren't going to be the monsters that we're used to. And then as the world evolved, I went, oh, wait, no, there can be. It's just they have to have this origin to them in order for it to work. So it's kind of it was what the world building needed, I guess, is the answer to that.
Interesting. And what do you think? It definitely makes your characters feel different, as you mentioned, than other versions of these that we've seen. In what ways, like do you feel like it makes them more fun to write or harder?
Well, I mean, it is. I don't know that it makes it, you know, more harder to write.
Or easier, I suppose.
Well, it definitely does. It definitely does make it. He's just like, no, pet me. I would definitely say that it makes it more interesting to write. I think that for the most part, we as human beings have a very difficult time really getting into truly alien mindsets. And if we were being really honest with ourselves, most of the monsters out there should have really alien mindsets. So I suppose from that point of view, it wasn't as difficult because I could look at the Thriss, or I could look at the, you know, most of the other, the Firebloods, the all of these other different races that were out there, and go, well, you know, they were originally human, so they're not going to think too differently from humans.
So, picking up on this, and forgive me, so when you read, you don't necessarily know how to pronounce things, so forgive me for that. But what led you to the design of the Vane race? You know, do you have any special influences or?
Well, and I know I have not made pronunciations easy on people. So Vane.
I actually read it that way because I'm Israeli, but I bet because you're American, you did it differently.
No, very, very. It's very rare that the that an end vowel is silent. It's very rare in any of the names. So in fact, I don't think I do it. So it'll be pronounced in some manner. But I mean, you know, on the most obvious level, they're elves. You know, they're elves. But I wanted to kind of hearken to, I mean, a classic trope of fantasy, which is the, you know, an ancient, immortal, kind of decadent, you know, whether it's, you know, Melanaeans or, you know, any of these races that have existed through fantasy that have this sort of, you know, debauched, dilettante kind of, you know, we're just gonna lay back on a couch and sip martinis, and are, you know, sophisticated and quite powerful. And I really, really wanted a race that could tell that the main portion of the story takes place in this empire called Kur. I really wanted a race that could tell Kur to stick it. That would be sort of the wall that the empire hits when they can't expand anymore. It's because they've butted up against.
And now everything falls down from that, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. I gotta tell you, this brings up a memory for me. We've had various people on the show over the past year and a half, and sometimes we get to talk about the worlds and then people go a little bit meta. And this happened to us twice. Once with Dave Farland, when he spoke about writing in Tolkien's world and making that choice, and another time in a show we did about urban fantasy, where I think it was Charlaine Harris who said, one of the ladies, we had several ladies here on the show, came and said, choosing to write in the world of werewolves and vampires, taking that in brings so much with it. And it's almost like you cheat because you write to a world people already know and recognize and connect with and have resonance with. But at the same time, they are your vampires. They are your elves. And there is something different about them.
Right.
How are
right.
your elves different?
Well, I mean, amongst everything, like Karen said, they're everybody's ultimately human. So they're not elves.
Mhm.
They behave like elves. There's some similar things. You can look at them and go, well, it's a very pretty immortal race. Okay, that's elven-like. The trope is there. Are they elves in the way that most people think of elves? No.
Mhm.
So I think that's probably the main way I've played off of the my ex is different trope. Just like the Morgagi are not orcs at all. But you could look at that and go, well, they kind of, sort of, maybe I squint, I can see orcs. Yeah.
So maybe now would be a good time for us to switch for a second and talk about your books and be able to show them on screen as well. We, as I said, enjoyed it, and it was quite a surprise for us. See what a wonderful graphic Alan has made for us.
Yeah, such good pictures, by the way.
What was?
So-
yeah, I have to. So Lars Grant West is the artist who has done all of the covers, and he's just amazing.
Really?
He's done a phenomenal job. Though that's all 3D. Which, I mean, I'm one of those people, because I am and worked as an illustrator for many years. I was like, no, never, no 3D covers will ever grace any of my books. They look, I'm not, and then they came up with these. I was like, never mind, we're good, we're fine.
One
I
of
think
these
the
is
thing
coming
is,
up, right?
what?
One of these is coming up.
No, these are all released.
So we have another graphic then for the one that's coming up.
Yes.
Alan's
The last
probably
book,
prepared.
yeah, the last book in the series, The Discord of Gods, is coming out in April of next year. So
there it is.
that's the one.
We got it.
I will share a little secret that I can't actually see the screen.
Well, it's this really cool skull. That's what
I have a
need
friend
to
who
know.
collects
It's
skulls.
screen, and it is a beautiful cover.
Yeah.
I wonder if you have any merch around that, though, if it's that beautiful and it's 3D.
Well, speaking of the art in the books, the maps in the books are something I was curious about. Who do you draw the maps? Who's works on that?
Yeah, I do all the interior art. So I've done all the maps, and I do all the little chapter interstitials and all of that. So the fun thing for me about doing the maps has been, because I'm not sure what you'd call it, role playing while writing, because the conceit of the books is that they're diegetic. They exist within the universe that they're written in, and they are pulled together by characters in the universe. So there's a character in the universe that's responsible for the first book, and there's a character that's responsible for the second book. I switched up the art styles under the assumption that it's actually those characters that are drawing the maps and the artwork.
So cool! I hadn't picked that up, but that is really great.
Yeah, I actually signed it, so you can see in the corner, because this is from the second book. So in the corner it says SV, which is the initials of Senere Var, who's supposed to be the person who's drawn this. I'm a nerd.
As you should be. As you should be. There's an entire community out there that I didn't even know about around building maps.
Oh, yeah.
Drawing maps.
Oh yeah.
Very much, very much. And it's that is a deep, deep rabbit hole. Let me tell you. It's fun, but it is an amazing amount of work that people put into fantasy maps and making sure that they get every single detail right. It's really mind blowing.
It's interesting to find all these sub-genres of fandom out there. The one that impressed me most that I found a couple of years ago, even though I generally knew it existed, was around language creation.
Yes,
Apparently
conlangs.
it started apparently, I'm sure it existed before that as well, right? On Usenet, of all places, like many different things, historical things for the internet. And people would critique each other's languages to a degree that's insane, and they would follow it. There is a book that came out. I will Google it in a second about creating languages by the guy who created the one for Song of Ice and Fire for the show.
Yes, he's quite famous for making the conlang community. I mean, Tolkien is obviously the most famous conlanger, and I think he even writes in a couple of his letters about. I mean, he describes it in the same sort of language that you would use about being in the closet. This idea of having this passion that you can't talk about, and you might pass somebody on the train who is clearly working on something and share a significant look because you both are in this club that everybody else would think you're really, really weird to be a part of. I discovered that if I don't create languages and then use those as the jumping off point for names, that my names tend to sound terribly fantasy. They sound very much like the sort of things you would come across in a D&D game. So as a result of that, I've ended up making a lot of languages, not necessarily because I am as passionate a conlanger as some of the other people that are out there. I fully admit I am not, but just as sort of a self-defense mechanism.
I gotta tell you, some of the things, it's going a little bit random for a second on a tangent, but I've learned some things through D&D. I remember, I think it was in the D&D manual, probably, John will probably jump up in a second and tell me exactly what version it was, but probably version 2, where they said you can bring a lot of interesting things into the world, but you cannot introduce things which will change the world. Now, what does that mean? And I spent a lot of time thinking about it. The example they gave was from industrialization of the running, what's it called? What's the thing called? Where you have a factory and you have a running...
pipeline?
I guess there is a name for it. Okay. So you can, if you introduce that into the world, right, you have changed something in how civilization works. And that was kind of my guideline on this. You can introduce concepts and ideas, but not change civilization. So I actually got a lot of thinking, philosophical thinking out of D&D in a way.
Oh, I've learned so much from D&D, quite honestly.
First edition. John says it's first edition Dungeon Master Guide. There we go, John to the rescue. Sorry,
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say I played first edition, and I'm pretty sure that's not in the little white chapbooks. But when I first started writing these books, and everybody would come back and be like, these are so complicated and intricate, and I was like, what are you talking about? They're just this is the sort of thing you would encounter in any D&D. No. And it turns out that my ability to juggle plot lines and details and all of these sorts of things that make these books so rich and interesting is purely a D&D trained skill, because you have long-running campaigns, you have plot threads that go back years, you have all of this stuff that you keep in your head, and it didn't strike me as being. Of course, this is a thing. Everyone can do. Everyone can do this. Turns out, not everyone can do this.
Well, a lot of geeks have learned. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, no, I'm just going to reiterate again. Learned it from D&D. So
This should be like a sticker. Learned it from D&D.
yeah.
LIDD. Learned it from D&D. There's a lot of geeks I know who first introduced themselves to personality and how different people are through the alignment system. It's you're a kid, you don't know much about people, you get beat up in school, but here is a cheat sheet by which you can categorize people.
Right.
Very bad
right.
for you to do that, but
Yeah.
here you go, it's a start.
I mean, yeah, no, and I personally kind of hate the alignment system, but I absolutely see what you're talking about. Particularly for fantasy in general. D&D certainly was definitely a haven for a lot of kids like myself who were bullied or who had less than perfect social experiences in school growing up, or at home. So I think it definitely gave us an opportunity to practice social skills in a way that we might not otherwise have had. I think that there's definitely been jobs I've held where I was like, well, what would this character do if I had to pull out my badass shoes and really kind of be hard on somebody about something.
Well, I'll share with you that geeks will be geeks, and we're still arguing on the backstage WhatsApp group about D&D versus AD&D first edition, white book, where was this, where was that. And honestly, this makes me happy. Geeking out makes me happy. But we're here to talk about your work, even though you're very fun. Karen, sorry, you were saying something?
Oh, yes. Well, I was going to say, I wanted to, so we've been talking about a lot of different, popular specific world building, games and systems. But I wanted to take a look at just, how you approach world building for these books in general, or for a new world. What are the aspects that you focus on first, or how do you think about, what are the struts of a new world for you?
Well, I usually start off with a concept. How did this world come to be? And I start big and go small is basically how it works. I start with sort of like universal foundations. How does the universe work? Are there divine beings? Are there not divine beings? What's physics like? Is there magic? I start there, and then at some point I'll probably whip up a map, and at that point I'll start kind of settling the world, so to speak. How did people come into it? What were the countries that formed? And I just kind of move it forward. And I know that seems like a lot of work, but there's two things that I have to point out about that. The first one is that I think this is fun. So it's not work for me because it's what I enjoy. And two, almost invariably, that ends up shaping into plot. It just seamlessly will end up, ultimately the story of A Chorus of Dragons came out of those early, planning sessions of how the universe was going to work. What were the important events that shaped it? And it turns out the important events that shaped it are still shaping it and are kind of the cataclysmic, potentially world-ending threat that everyone needs to stop. So.
Okay, we have a couple of questions before we head off to Martine Land. So, first of all, just quickly, why Batman?
Why Batman? Why not Batman?
Done.
Done.
Let's go into what version of Batman, or should we?
Honestly, yeah, no, that's a fair question. Honestly, Batman was my introduction into comic books, and I found Batman and completely dove in. Looking back at it as an adult, there's some maybe Batman has some issues. I think it's occasionally fun that even in the comic books they will take the time to lay out the problems of a billionaire trying to solve things in a very, almost infantile violence solution instead of using his money.
Yeah, it's one of the things about Batman. There's just really seemed like he had other ways he could have gone about this.
Yeah, and there have been times in the comics where they do like spotlight that, but then of course everyone will immediately go back to.
So should we wait for a Batman and the Methods of Rationality from you?
That would be.
I have lots of opinions on lots of stuff.
Well, how about fountain pens then? What do you think your favorite fountain pen is and why?
Well, I don't have a favorite, truthfully. I think that there are many fabulous fountain pens out there. Currently I am actually signing most of my books with some variation on a Moon Man, which is a Chinese company. And these are super cheap. This is like a $20 pen, which for a fountain pen is cheap. But they're drop fill pens, so they hold just a ton of ink, and they have a little bit of flex to the nib, so I can get the swirls I need for my signature, and they're fabulous. I also have much more expensive pens, including some antiques, some antique Schaeffers, and Watermans, and those are fabulous.
What do you think about moon pens? Moon pens. What do you think about those?
Which ones?
Moon pens?
Moon pens.
Moon men. Sorry, Moon men.
Moon Man.
I'm trying to figure out. John says he's writing with Moon Men's, and I read.
Yeah. This is a Moon Man.
This is a Moon Man.
Yeah, this is a Moon Man.
So I actually am very interested in this, but I know nearly nothing about it. There was an article coming out a few years ago, I think in the Atlantic, that discussed. I'm being very careful because I don't know much about it. I want to get the point across. Which discussed how it's an art that's leaving the world in a way, right?
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, certainly, the reason why people go so nuts over antique fountain pens is literally because nobody makes those nibs anymore. Because there's not enough money in it. So, it's a because this is not a pen style that everyone uses. These pens the nibs are expensive to manufacture to certain tolerances to get that sort of flexible nib that does all those really cool writing styles. So literally, like the most expensive pens that you get these days can't compare to a reasonably cheap pen from the 30s. So that's why that happens. But I feel like there's been a resurgence in interest in fountain pens and in handwriting and a lot of these things like that. I don't see it dying. I definitely don't see it dying. I think that that there are people that question why they need to know how to do it. And it's certainly not necessarily required teaching in schools anymore. Like I know there's definitely there's been some slacking off in that, but I see a lot of people as adults going back and saying, okay, I'm going to improve my handwriting. I'm going to go back and learn these techniques. So
interesting. Well, we can keep on forever. For example, we are geeks. We are passionate about these things. We can talk. I want to hear more from you, but I think that we do have some other plans on this show as well that are going to be pretty exciting.
I'm going to talk about another thing that I'm fairly passionate about.
And I'll be mostly quiet throughout this. I always promise this. It never happens, but I can promise, right?
You can try.
Karen, I can try. Exactly, I can try. But Karen will take us into the whole martini thing with Tammy Coxon joining us.
Yes.
Yes.
Tammy is one of my favorite people. She's also been in Dublin. She's helped make Dublin happen. What did you do in Dublin? Tell everybody, please, Tammy. You're muted,
Oh.
or your audio is off, or something of the sort.
Yep, can't hear you.
I was the division head for member and staff services.
Boom.
Excellent.
So whenever somebody was nice to you when you walked in and tried to do something, that was Tammy. At some
Sure.
point during the convention, because we had a minor problem with lines, she created a survey that was really, really funny, and she went around the lines to make people more happy and asked them really funny questions.
I gotta say though, people were pretty cool about it. So
They were.
yeah, it's not like how I would expect queues to go for any convention in the States. So you know, everyone kept their cool. It was good.
What were some of the questions, Tammy? Do you remember at this stage, or am I
Oh,
hitting you?
yeah. I just looked at it. So the first question was, what shoe size do you wish you wore? And that kind of set the tone for things, for people to understand this is not your usual kind of thing. What was your favorite Star Wars movie, Wrath of Khan or E.T.? That one really got people going. What is your favorite color of blue? That was very interesting vocabulary exercise. My favorites were the people who gave the hex code for.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah,
Oh, lovely.
They knew their favorite blue in hex. So yeah, it was
Okay.
really, really fun.
Oh, that sounds delightful. All right. So what we're here to discuss today is what makes a perfect martini. And Tammy is prepared to demonstrate her technique in her favorites.
Look at that bar.
Well, as Karen and Gotti know, this is my job, right? I teach people to make cocktails. So I definitely have opinions on the martini. But Karen, to your question, what makes the perfect martini? It's such an individual question. There is no one right answer. Everybody has their own perfect martini. My perfect martini may be different today than tomorrow than the next day, depending on my mood and if it's raining and how my day went.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately why we were really quick to go, no, it shouldn't be a contest, because yeah, it is a highly variable thing, and as tastes evolve too, your opinions on what you want to drink in a martini will change.
Absolutely.
So, I don't drink the same kind of martini now that I did, a decade ago.
I have one rule that I'm curious, Karen and Jen, if you guys agree. A martini must be very, very cold.
Yes.
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 That's absolutely key. Should we also define what we're talking about when we say martini? So when I think of a martini, I'm very specifically talking about a classic drink invented in the late 1800s that is now, maybe not then, but now composed of gin and dry vermouth as a requirement, and then can additionally have some other ingredients or garnishes. But gin and dry vermouth is like my key here. How about you guys?
Yep. No, that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Are you also a gin fan?
Yes.
No, it's less controversial maybe than we thought.
Yes. Well, all right, our fight is going really well.
Yeah, see, this is part of we're like, maybe it shouldn't be a contest because we're just going to be sitting here agreeing with each other.
Okay, well, I will say that I, for the sake of romance, really wanted to like the Vesper martini best. And I tried to, but I just don't.
Right, it's just watered down. It's just watered down gin. I got pranked the other day at my favorite bar. I went in and had a bartender who, because of COVID, who hasn't served me a drink in 16 months. And I sat down and I said, dealer's choice. And he went off and he did a lot of things. And he came back and he handed me a drink. And it's like, taste it. I was like, what is it? He's like, it's a Vesper. I was like, thank you, Casey. It was a very well executed Vesper, I will say that. But
that's good. I mean, they look wonderful in the movies. Like they're like the book nerd who, like, just the fan in me wanted this to actually just be my favorite martini. I remember being so disappointed and trying repeatedly like at different bars and then making my own, and then just sort of wondering about, like, is this really what James Bond was drinking? Wow.
Well, then, of course, there is the question, the fundamental question, right, that James Bond, in my opinion, has kind of ruined for so many people. He says, of course, shaken, not stirred. And in my opinion, I have very strong opinions that martinis should be stirred, not shaken.
Stirred. I go with Auntie Mame's advice, not James Bond's advice. But I mean, but there's some people who've, like plenty of people have picked that one apart and gone, yeah, he asked for shaken because he wanted a watered down drink.
Exactly.
Because he didn't want to get as drunk as he would have gotten if it had been stirred.
Now, of course, if you properly stir your martini, you can get it to almost the same level of dilution as James' shaken one. So, what are you drinking, Jen? I know you had a martini ready to go.
Yes. So I am drinking. It's actually a little bit off from a purely classic martini. This is St. George's Terroir as the gin. I saw it on your shelf, which is one of my very favorite gins, dry vermouth.
Which brand?
And it's just Dolan.
Just Dolan, she says. Just Dolan. Only the one of the best dry vermouths on the market.
It's my favorite. And the departure is a little bit of Zerben's stone pine liqueur. And some orange bitters, which I mean, like this is the perfect martini if you're a dryad. You really just want to be drinking a forest.
Yeah, it's really funny because I didn't come into this with a plan as to what martini I was going to make because I wanted to kind of talk to you guys and see what ideas you had for me. But the St. George Terroir was one of the gins that I had put to the front of the shelf to go, maybe this one today. It is exactly like you say, gin for dryad. So really piney. It's got California bay laurel and Douglas fir, fennel. So it's just, and juniper, of course, that makes the gin, but it's so piney. I love that description of it.
Yeah, I love, it's one of my very, very favorite gins. So,
and then to double down on that with the Zerben's pine liqueur, that's truly impressive.
Yeah,
I could almost match yours, except I have no Zerben's. So.
I don't even remember where or why I got the Zerben's, but like I've used it maybe a handful of times. Maybe it doesn't get pulled down very often.
Now here's the key question: what is your ratio? This is like at the heart of the martini.
Right? Yeah. No. Absolutely. Well, so this was my first time with this combination. I went with 2.5 ounces of gin, a quarter and just a quarter ounce of Zerben's and the vermouth. Okay. I might go a little heavier on the vermouth next time.
Right. But that's one of the things people don't realize is that there's quite a lot of joy to a wet martini. Karen, do you have a preferred spec, as I would call it? What's your order?
Yeah, I tend to go for dirty martinis. I like the olive brine in there, and we'll generally go for. I tend to just add a few extra olives also. So my martinis are sort of an olivey drink for me.
I was like, it's an excuse to eat olives then. Is this what you're telling us?
There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
No.
That's my main twist that I keep coming back to.
Well, I teach cocktail classes. That's my gig. And I teach a class called the Martini Lab, where we have people taste a bunch of gins on their own, taste a bunch of vermouths on their own, and kind of craft their own martini at the end of the class. And the first thing we do in that class is we do a blind taste test of different ratios, because everybody thinks they like a dry martini. And most people don't, as it turns out.
Most people don't, yeah. No, we've got I blame like Winston Churchill and other people like that who have made it like cool to say like, oh, just pass the vermouth in the same room and that's enough. Like, no, come on. The vermouth is an important part of the cocktail.
I 100% agree. The other thing I will blame for that is the dark ages of cocktails. So this is like, the 70s to 90s roughly. Vermouth is wine. A lot of people don't realize this, and it will go bad. And so if you keep it in your liquor cabinet, within a week or two at the most, it's bad.
Yeah.
And, you wouldn't drink a bottle of wine that you'd had sitting in your liquor cabinet open for a year.
Right.
And so I think that one of the reasons martinis got drier and drier is because it literally was toxic waste and you didn't want it anywhere near your drink. But with good quality fresh vermouth, I'm all in on a wet martini. My preferred spec is Beefeater gin is sort of my go-to. Beefeater gin, Dolan dry vermouth, 3 parts gin to 1 part, so 3-to-1 ratio.
Yep.
And then orange bitters and a lemon twist. So that would be my usual spec. I was going to let you guys weigh in today. I have this Pickering's gin, which is from Edinburgh, a great Scottish gin that is not, to my knowledge, available in the US, and I love it so much that I
brought back a bottle of Sixling from Dublin.
I don't know that one.
Oh my God, it's a cloudberry gin.
Okay.
It is so amazing. I'm gonna cry when it runs out because again, you can't get it in the States. So it's gin, and then as it fades down, it goes through these different flavor profiles, finishing like it's got one of the longest tails of any gin I've ever had in terms of taste. And then it'll go through this berry thing at the end. It's amazing. It's so good.
That's what I think so interesting about gin, right? Is that there's so many different botanicals. We talked about the Douglas fir one, the St. George terroir, so super piney. Beefeater is kind of your standard juniper, citrus, coriander kind of flavor profile. Pickering's is like that with just a little bit of a tweak. But I also pulled out this Gentilly gin. So this is one from New Orleans, one of my favorite places in the world. And it's got persimmon and elderflower as some of its botanicals.
Wow.
So, right. And so that's like the fun for me of a martini is because it is so gin forward, you really do get to experience the gin modified a little bit with those other ingredients. I should mix one. What do you guys think I should mix with?
Oh, goodness. I'm
sort of interested in this New Orleans one you were just telling us about.
Yeah, I'm really, really interested in that.
All right. Yeah, so it's a little bit of a softer gin. So even though I would normally do like a 3-to-1 ratio, so for me, because we talked about martinis being really cold, I always want my martini to be really small as well, because I want to be able to drink it while it's still ice cold. And then if I want another one, I'll just make a second martini.
Right. Yeah. This is a big glass for a small drink.
Yeah. That's why I love my little coupes here.
Yeah.
And they don't tip as much as a martini glass too. So I would usually go 3-to-1. For me, that would be 1.5 ounces of gin to 1/2 ounce of dry vermouth. I'm going to use a little more gin here because this one is softer. So I'm going to use 2 ounces, I think.
Yeah, I took it kind of conservatively because I hadn't tried this combination before.
Sure.
So, like I said, next time, little more, because I like it. It's good.
And that's the joy, right? You get to experiment. All right, and then I'm going to go 1/2 ounce of my vermouth. I poured a little more than 1/2. That's okay. I don't mind.
I won't tell.
And then I was thinking about if I want orange bitters in this, that's my usual, or if I want to go weird on my bitters. So there's definitely a really cardamom note to this gin as well as those floral flavors. So I'm not going to go cardamom bitters. That would be too much. But I have these little black lemon bitters.
Oh.
And I thought maybe I'll do that instead of orange bitters.
That sounds lovely.
Give it a try. Did you do a garnish on yours, Jen?
I didn't because I'm lazy.
Are you normally a garnish person? If
I have it.
What do you like? An olive or a twist?
I usually like a twist. I just didn't have any lemons.
The pain is real. There were times during the pandemic where I could not buy limes. I would go to 3 different stores and I would have to teach a class or do something and I could not buy any limes. So it was a problem.
Yeah. I can well imagine. Oof.
You can see why, bartenders like to shake martinis because it goes really fast, right? We're stirring this, I'm still going. but I
Yeah.
want to make sure I get it really good and cold. And that ice is also really key because it's also adding water to the drink. If you just put gin in a glass, it's not really a martini. You kind of need that water in there to open up all those flavors.
Well, I remember hearing somewhere that a cocktail is 3 ingredients, and for a martini, water is one of those ingredients. It's a vital part of it.
So that's interesting. The historic word cocktail referred to a very specific style of drink, which was 3 ingredients. It was a base spirit, a bitters, and a sweetener. So I think that's where a cocktail is 3 ingredients comes from. So a martini is like its own family, where it's a base spirit, a wine-based modifier, and some kind of accent ingredient is the way I think about that family. But yeah, water is a key ingredient there. I like a lot of lemon, so I put a nice big lemon twist on mine.
That's excellent.
Cheers.
That's lovely. Cheers.
Good. Yeah.
All right.
Well, that was fun. It's fascinating to me to be a part of experts talking about a topic. It's just, even if you don't learn anything, which you usually would, and you might learn just enough to be interesting if you ever meet somebody who knows about it. Say, I don't know much about it, but I heard that James Bond just didn't want to get drunk. So it's kind of interesting to have a cheat like that. But being in the presence of excellence on something is just very attractive for me. So I want to thank you all personally for this segment of the show and sharing your love in a way that came across the camera.
It's all about being geeky, right? And you can be geeky about everything. I am a cocktail geek. That's what I do, right? So I'm also a science fiction fan, but I do read books, right? I'm more of a con runner than a reader even. So like my geekiness is about cocktails and con running.
Which is fair.
Yeah. I mean,
it's
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, probably not one of my biggest regrets, but there's always been a little bit thing in the back of my head that does regret that I didn't introduce cocktails into any of my books. Although I always make a point to make sure that you know what the local liquors are. So
there is a website out there that creates liquors. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yes, a lot of my interest in food and drink actually is like the Vesper, and my interest in the Vesper is very telling. I will often try to cook things that go with a book or especially a show as I have people over to watch it with me. So like one of my favorite cookbooks is the Game of Thrones cookbook that paired a medieval version and then a more modern version of a number of different dishes. And so there's when people go out of their way to write these into worlds, I'm always the first one who is like, all right, I'm going to make this with this, like as I consume this art. I want to taste what the characters are tasting. I want to share it with my friends. I love that element of world. So I encourage the cocktails. There's a lot
of food in my books, and I've had people definitely say, okay, so how would I make this? And unfortunately, I've had to come back with, well, this food doesn't actually exist. this ingredient doesn't actually exist. But someday I'll probably sit down and try to.
It reminds me of the Galaxy Quest thing. It's all real. I knew it.
but it's fun to come up with things. So this is art from the Arcane Cocktail Enthusiast. So this was a Kickstarter for a comic book, right? So it's a comic book about somebody who runs a magic cocktail bar basically, and the back of it has. So this was one of the Kickstarter extras, has a bunch of recipes on it, and so. This one calls for the Chimera Sting. Chimera or Chimera?
Chimera, actually.
Chimera. Thank you. I needed to learn my new thing today. The Chimera Sting has 2 ounces of gin and then Chimera venom, unsweetened cranberry juice, and club soda. And then it says, in lieu of Chimera venom, try ginger lemon simple syrup, and gives you the instructions for making ginger lemon simple syrup.
Yeah, that's exactly what I need to do.
5 whiskers from the beard of a mountain dwarf freely given is half an ounce of absinthe or herb saint.
Well,
we had Tammy on the show before when Malka, I believe it was with the Malka Older show, where there is a website that creates cocktails for books.
Yeah. There's a couple. I think actually it's not just one. And there's a friend of mine who did cocktails. He did a cocktail for the House of Always, which was hilarious because I was like, wait, what? Which of course it was tiki themed, and delicious.
You should share that recipe, Jen. I have all the rums, so I'm all in on tiki themed drinks.
Well, it was. Let me see real quick, without like pulling things out of paste too quick.
I'll share then, and just to give you time to search.
It was. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, take your time. I will share that we had on some other guests, and Tony. I'm blanking out on one of my friends' names. This should never happen, and if she's watching this, she will never forgive me. But Tony, as I always call her, Tony Kellner, there we go, came on the show and shared a limerick that she wrote for Dragon magazine in the 80s. The love of D&D goes deep in many different directions that you would never expect. And we have just recently started the sort of D&D group for the people who do Essence of Wonder. And I picked a certain alignment that makes me an asshole. And in a way that is pretty interesting as opposed to the usual asshole. And therefore, in the middle of the worst situations, I ruined the entire scenario by starting to...
But Gotti, you're supposed to be role-playing.
I am, with limericks. I'm the only one who laughs, by the way. You can look at Karen's face right now.
Yeah, she does not seem amused.
I think she's also stuck with her
camera.
I
was going to say, I think
she's but
any luck digging up the recipe, Jen?
Yes. Hold on. I just found it. I think. Yeah, hold on. Okay. So it's the drink itself is called Obey the Lash, which is totally appropriate. So it's 1.5 ounces of dark rum, 1 ounce of lime juice, 3/4 of an ounce of orgeat,
Yum.
1/2 ounce of blue curacao, and 1/2 ounce of Italicus bergamotto topped.
Oh, nice. That sounds great.
Topped with soda water.
I don't have the Italicus, but otherwise I'd be all in on that.
It comes out exactly the same color as the book cover.
Which is like going to be like a baby. What color though? Because the dark rum and the blue curacao and the orgeat are going to interact really strangely. I think
it comes out teal.
Okay.
Like this bright teal blue.
Okay.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Fascinating.
All right. I must admit this was fun. Jen, you're absolutely amazing. If you could stay with us for a few minutes, we would appreciate it. Tammy, as always, I appreciate you coming on, and you make this even more fun than it has any right to be.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you. And of course, please, if you could stay with us for a few minutes. So, first of all, you can always find more about Jen at jennlyons.com. And if you enjoyed, you can subscribe on our website, essenceofwonder.com, for more content. We do this twice a month. And we no longer let people register for this show and come on Zoom. We have moved from Zoom, and now we are just a streaming show. So if you like our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Twitch pages, you'll be able to see us live, which we think is much, much better. In 3 weeks, Patricia Jackson, the author of Forging a Nightmare, will be joining us here for a show around P. Jelly Clark's excellent Master of Jinn. This was Essence of Wonder. We hope you have an excellent week, and we hope to see you soon. And that's a wrap.